There we go.
All
You're all
right.
good.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Heather and
Awesome.
David, for inviting me to your call. I love the lively conversation going on here. A lot of great energy. And I
Excellent.
see a lot of
So
great
Vince,
friends
this is the
from
part.
Microsoft
Vince,
days.
give me 1 sec, please, and we'll
Sure.
introduce you.
Oh,
And
I'm
then,
sorry.
no, it's okay. It's
Jumped
okay. I
in.
just had to
He's
have a
just
recording
he's
start.
raring to go. He's ready.
I love it. I love it. It's only 4:29, Vince. Hold on. It'll be okay. I promise you. Big breaths, growth mindset. We're going to edit that one out. So, hi. This is David Perlman,
And Heather Cox.
this is MS Office Hours for May 28th. And today we have the pleasure of spending about a half hour with Vince Menzioni. Vince has been a great leader both at Microsoft and some other places that he's been. And so we're going to be discussing partnerships today. So I'll turn it over to you, Vince, and really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, David and Heather, and delighted to be here with so many friends from Microsoft days. So I saw a lot of familiar names up there, and just great to be here. My career has been focused on embracing disruptive technology and building successful partnerships to grow business. And it's been my life's work to further the art and science of partnering in the technology sector. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. It's a culmination of a lot of work over many years, and I'll discuss that a little bit more about my background and how we got here at this point. But certainly in the last 10 or 11 weeks through COVID, I've been thinking quite a bit about partnerships and how to lead and what's important to leading partnerships during these uncertain times. And so just a little introduction, a little bit about me. I've had several hometowns. I grew up in New Jersey. I lived in Pennsylvania for the bulk of my professional career, moved to Florida, and then most recently been in Charleston, South Carolina, as part of the most recent opportunity I've been working in. I've described my career as having multiple transformations. It's a career and personal life that has been rooted in transformation, disruptive technology, and transforming. And this is how I got to the art and science of partnering. The first part of my career was in the early days of wireless computing, and we helped launch that technology before Wi-Fi. And I found that working with other organizations and building credibility through other organizations helped our company succeed and become the number two in that marketplace during that time of transformation and growth. I then followed one of the leaders there to do a turnaround, and that's where I got really ingrained in building partnerships. For a company right after 9/11, I was asked to build a government strategy for that organization, built a partner ecosystem, got a GSA schedule, and then also launched several partnerships, which ultimately led to that company being acquired by our largest single partner. It was also a really interesting time because it was right after 9/11. Technology was starting to get used for solving some of the big issues that we faced after 9/11, again during a crisis time similar to what we have today. And I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill playing a role with this technology organization, introducing the technology to leaders in government, as well as building partnerships with and through other technology companies. So partnership wasn't just about partnering, but it was also about building partnerships with government officials. I then left and joined Microsoft. I was recruited by Microsoft by Linda Zecker when she was leading the U.S. public sector business. And I was Microsoft's U.S. public sector partner leader for 9 years. So I worked with the education teams under all of your leaders, including Jamie. And then I worked with the federal government, state and local government, and healthcare business. So I got to know Microsoft pretty broadly and spent a lot of time in Redmond, not only just partnering with Microsoft partners, but also being the voice of an advocate for the partner business to the corporate folks at Microsoft. So partnering was at many different levels. When I left Microsoft, I started a podcast called The Ultimate Guide to Partnering. And I'll talk a little bit more about that podcast as we talk through this discussion. But 60 episodes over about a 2-year span. I paused that for the last year and a half or so, and I'm bringing that podcast back again in the next few weeks. So I'll be posting more details about it, but ultimateguidetopartnering.com, and it's available on Google, Apple, basically any place that you can get podcasts. And I founded an organization called Cloudway Partners to help technology leaders to be successful and thrive during disruptive times. And I'll talk more about that as we move on. I saw this from the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, just several weeks ago when COVID first hit, and I really like this quote by Winston Churchill, who led during an amazing time, a really tough time. Led England and was a world leader. But I just like this phrase that now is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. And I think what it says here is we're living in an uncertain time. Like, we don't know where we are in this process, right? There's been a lot of discussion about what's going to be the implications of COVID and how's it affecting business, what the long-term implications are. And so we're sort of in this middle, or I'll still call it a sense of uncertainty. And we as humans all crave certainty. It's one of our basic human needs. And this need for certainty just, is something that drives our behavior in both positive ways and also negative ways. So I know we're all kind of dealing with this. We're looking like, okay, but is it okay to go out now? And David, you're in Charleston. You're seeing that we're a lot more lax down here than maybe New York City and New Jersey and other places in the country. We have a different approach to this, and maybe because we haven't seen some of the impact that other places that are more densely populated have had. I'm hoping that we're going to be a better place because over this next period of time. But again, we don't have any real certainty at this point. But there's a few things that come to mind during this uncertainty. We're all experiencing rapid acceleration and transformation and change in our economy, our culture, our lifestyle. I mean, I go online and I order now from Whole Foods and they deliver to my home. I'm spending a lot more time placing orders with Amazon and having things delivered here that I would normally have gone to the store for. We're all seeing this, right? What's happening in education, just this. I think Satya said this. We've seen 2 years of acceleration within 2 months, and this rapid pace of change. So the pandemic has increased the pace of change and transformation. Online learning, we're all living it right now. This opportunity is massive, right? And they're going to be, I'll talk more about what I believe about this time, but this transformation is happening at an increased pace, and technology will be a critical accelerant. And those that win will learn to dance with uncertainty versus fighting the change. And it's all about that, right? We need to pivot. We'll talk about some of the success factors, but it is learning to dance with uncertainty during this time. So what do I believe to be true during this time? One is that we're going to continue to see radical shifts. This transformation will happen at a rapid pace, and technology will be a critical accelerant. Laggard sectors of the economy, especially ones that have not embraced the rapid change, will fall off and die. Healthcare, education, public sector, and communications will be leaders and see increased technological investments in those sectors. And partnering with other organizations will be a force multiplier to business success. Organizations that embrace the fundamentals of partnering will have the best chance and ultimately survive. And I've seen this in multiple arenas, both in the technology, the true partnering arena, but I've also seen it in 9/11, what happened when governments started partnering with organizations to accelerate and solve big problems. I mentioned the podcast, and it's a great body of work. There are 60 podcast episodes out there. I've interviewed many leaders from Microsoft and other technology companies, and also partners that got it right. And from that body of work, I've been able to distill basically a set of success factors and failure factors when it comes to partnering. Whether you're building a key alliance with another organization or a department in your organization, or you're partnering with critical vendors supporting your organization, business partnering can be a key accelerant to business growth, to disruption, to transformation. And through my experiences leading organizations and with all these interviews, I've compiled these key attributes of success and failure in the technology space. So why do organizations fail partnering? I find that most often culture is the most significant factor in successful partnering. If an organization's culture is risk averse or steeped in an old business model, applying the change necessary to successfully partnering with another organization can block the success and survival of the program. In addition, having a scarcity mentality followed by a lack of urgency to disrupt the current model can be deterrents to success. And I see this often. I've seen this very often with organizations moving to the cloud. I think many of you have seen this as well. If there's not that sense of urgency to do it, we've seen that it hasn't happened. Now, in the last 2 months, there's been a tremendous amount of urgency in a lot of organizations to disrupt and to accelerate the move to the cloud. The third area is around not being aggressive enough as an organization. And that shows up in a lot of different ways. It shows up in engagement between partners, in terms of in sales engagement in a sales-oriented business like Microsoft or its partners, and other ways that people block and don't advance the model. So what about organizations that get it right? And during these uncertain times, more so than ever, the organizations that get it right, partnering, have a set of attributes, common attributes that I found. Again, through these 60 episodes of the podcast, I asked each of the guests, what made successful partners, and why did you see partners fail? And this was distilled from all of these interviews. Partners that succeed have these following traits, and applying these principles is more important now than ever to advancing change and transformation during this rapid transformation cycle. The first one, we talked about this, David, earlier, is growth mindset. Growth mindset, building and cultivating partnerships requires a growth mindset. Organizations with a growth mindset reward a fail-fast approach to change and reward risk-taking. They don't penalize people that take risk. Change isn't easy, and you have to take pilot steps and do things in a way that you might have to back off from later on. And so building successful partnerships often requires embracing a new and different approach and then learning from that approach. During this time of uncertainty, realizing that your partners can add value and help amplify your message with an abundance mindset can yield positive results. The other key factor, and it's almost, I almost put growth mindset and commitment at the same level of importance in why partnerships can be successful in organizations, is around commitment. And actually, you all saw Satya on the last slide. I didn't have to mention who that person was. But this is Tony Savoyan, who for many years was a top Microsoft partner in the education space. Tony's company, SADA Systems, exuded commitment. They had a commitment to Microsoft at the executive level, and they drove the engagement at the executive level. And I saw that exemplified within the way he conducted himself and how his business looked at partnering with Microsoft. It's everyone in the organization, from the executive level down to the floor of the organization, to every function, believing in partnering and this level of partnership between these two organizations. And the organization that got it right were committed to changing the business model at the very top. Change management isn't easy, and every department in the company needs to buy in. And if it's done well, partners can be a force multiplier to reaching new markets, to adding solutions and capabilities, and driving successful outcomes, especially during these times.
So Vincent, every once in a while we may interject or take a live question. We'll
Absolutely.
say some questions at the end, but it's really interesting from your perspective, right? Last week we had somebody that has spent, PhD in education, and they actually said, the things that are going to be most important for them, and it wasn't a segue to your discussion, was trying to find those partners, within your educational institution. So it might be that dean, it might be that provost or a CFO, or, it's not just people in IT anymore. A lot of us spend our lives in IT, but finding those stakeholders that are really trying to influence that change and transformation, I think, is critical.
Yep. And approaching it with a growth mindset on both sides, and both being committed to the outcome, right? Excellent. Setting that vision and then being committed to the objectives.
They say if you give a baby an egg, they're gentle with it.
The third area of focus, the third area or attribute of successful partnering is around focus. We used to use this term at Microsoft, let's not boil the ocean, right? So rather than boiling the ocean, successful partnerships requires stripping out the complexity and friction to focus on the one thing those two organizations, whether they be internal to sets of stakeholders within an existing academic institution, or whether they be vendor and academic institution partnerships, what's the one thing that we can successfully accomplish together, right? And during COVID, this might be just to improve a specific area, drive the right set of outcomes in a specific area. Like, I could think of several different areas now with school closing and schools reopening. And what are the things that we can do to drive that outcome? So it's just focusing on the things that we can do, simplifying what we can do, finding a unique niche, and then executing on that. The fourth area of successful partnerships is around investments. Most successful organizations invest in the necessary resources, capital, and time to make the successful outcomes happen. They believe the ROI will ultimately be higher than other models, and studies have proved that, certainly making the right investments and partnerships leads to outstanding growth. There's a force multiplier approach here with partnering, and partnerships create armies of organizations that can go do things together. So whether it's partnering within your own organization to drive an outcome, whether it's a vendor relationship partnership, these things all lead and help drive success and help accelerate the path to success during these, and are invaluable during these uncertain times. The fifth attribute to successful partnering is agility, right? We talk about failing fast mentality as part of the growth mindset. It's also skating to where the puck is going, and often it's doing things and making micro investments. It might be specifically, we need to improve in this area. Let's go do this one thing and test it out and pilot it and see if it works. It might be in the case of one organization that has a specific need and looks to another organization to see, how did you do that? And it might be partnering either with a vendor, or it might be partnering internally to drive those things. But agility, having a sense of agility, ultimately leads to the most optimal outcomes, because you can fail fast, you can come back from that, and you can test new approaches, new markets, and business approaches. And then the sixth area, it goes without saying in many cases, but it's often neglected, is once you've lined up what you need to do, once you have your vision, you have a set of goals you need to achieve, it's executing the plan, it's driving the traction of the plan. Sometimes it's the hardest thing to do, right? Because it's great to set some core key objectives, maybe only focus on one thing, but then you need to execute against that. And it's driving the why. It's identifying who the key stakeholders are, what their roles are, identifying what those roles look like and describing them completely, and what the responsibilities are for those roles. It's then communicating the vision. Leaders communicate well. They communicate a clear vision, they set direction, they align the groups, and they set clear expectations throughout the organization. They then hold people accountable and organizations accountable for achieving those outcomes, and they monitor and they measure success, and they do it regularly. They test how the outcomes are driving. They create scorecards to do that. Organizations like Microsoft obviously do this really well. They cascade a set of outcomes down from each of the business units, and each of the businesses are accountable for a scorecard. But organizations that have partnerships often forget that that's important to do between two organizations, and to measure and monitor the success of the partnership. And again, this is the most critical from a delivery perspective in meeting the vision that's been set. You can have all the other pieces in place, but if they're not monitoring and measuring the outcomes, you won't get there. So again, uncertain times, and I've seen a lot of leaders step up in big ways here. And there's only a fraction of the organizations out there. The world I've looked at in terms of the technology partnerships is certainly the one I know the best. But the leaders, the ones that get it right, there's a fraction of 1% of those organizations that are the true leaders. They do the things above and beyond just the 5 or 6 things I just talked about in terms of key attributes. And it's all about leadership here. It's what leaders do in uncertain times. And during these uncertain times, the best leaders create certainty. They elevate their voice, they lead with transparency and intimacy, they add more value, and they act as bold inspirations to their organizations, their constituents, and their communities. And this is what sets apart the rest in terms of what's needed, especially right now during these times. And I think we've all seen this, right? We've seen some of this in government. We've seen it in the organizations in which we work. We know who the successful leaders are because they share that vision, they chart the course, they elevate their voice, and they lead the way. And so, one of the things I want to leave you with here, and over these last several weeks, almost 3 months now, I've been reminded of a favorite book, classic book, by Dr. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And in this book, this Nazi concentration camp survivor recounts lessons learned from his ordeal and his survival. And my favorite quote is this one here. The one thing we can't take away from me is the way I choose to respond to what you do to me. The last of one's freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. And thankfully, we're not living during that type of situation, that type of environment. And I don't directly equate what we're experiencing today with a concentration camp. However, I do believe choice and the role we play can lead to more successful outcomes for our businesses and ultimately a more positive impact to our world and society. And many of us who know the way we can impact in education, just think about the things that we can be doing to have a really positive impact on students and teachers, the whole learning process as we move ahead to this next phase. And, one of the things I'll just leave with is just that, I think that there's going to be so many different solutions and technology approaches that we haven't even thought about that will evolve now over what's happened over these last few months. I think it's an exciting time. And looking through to the future, not with uncertainty, but with an optimism for what the future will bring for education and for all of us is just, it gets me excited every day.
Very
so,
good. Oops, sorry.
There's several ways to reach me, and David, I'm happy to have you share this deck with all the listeners here, or viewers here today. But you can reach me at cloudwavepartners.com. You can reach me at The Ultimate Guide to Partnering if you'd like to download and listen to episodes of the podcast. There are several that are they've been out there for a couple of years. I've interviewed Gabriella Schuster. I've interviewed a lot of leaders at Microsoft, different parts of the business. Margot Day was a guest when she was still leading the U.S. education business. There's really some great nuggets out there of business leadership. And it's not just around partnering. I talk about what led to their success, what were their success secrets. So there's some interesting information that's available. And I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook as Vince Menzione. And I'd love to stay in touch if you have any questions or needs or just like to stay in contact. Love to do that.
So thank you first off, Vince. I really appreciate you, kind of getting out of your comfort zone a little bit and, doing this mixed media thing. And, what a social media maven you've turned into from, 5 or 6 years ago. So I love the fact that you're continuing to kind of evolve what you're doing. You've been in the technology arena probably as long as I have, 30 odd years across various capacities. A couple quick questions, and then we'll have some time to take a few questions from the audience. One, as IT leaders, right? For many of us, right? And some of us wear that ed tech hat. Some of us are more education versus technology. We consistently hear about where do we look and try to find those partnerships. Where do you find, right? So if I'm trying to find that that able partner, right? And I'll say out in the business of education, how do you broach those subjects, right? So you and I kind of connected. I wasn't shy about reaching out to you. What are the things that make it easy to have those partnership discussions with people internally? Hey, we have this tool named Teams, or hey, we're using this other technology. Doesn't mean that we don't use it. How do we bridge those conversations in the best way possible, I guess, with those transformations?
I think success leaves clues. And, I think just through conversations with folks and learning what other organizations are doing that are successful, that's the best way to find out what made those organizations successful, and finding out who were those key partnerships, what did they do differently and better. And I think you can learn a lot by having those types of conversations with people, whether it be within academia about new approaches to learning, whether it be a technology drive that happened within an organization and how they adopted technology better than other organizations. Find out, you can have those conversations. People are very open in this environment, as you know. People share quite a bit. It's not like they're competing against one another like in the commercial arena. And I just think having communities and conversations and networking with peers helps to have those conversations. I think it's just, even though we all move digitally, just having phone conversations with people just leads to so much more value in terms of learning.
That's great. And one of the community members actually had said, you need to focus on solutions and not technology to bring solutions, just not on technology per se for itself. And so here at office hours, right, my job is not to get fired every time I come on, because I am who I am, and I can speak slower, speak louder, and present in front of large and small audiences. But I'm pretty genuine, as I think everybody that's on the Microsoft side, and Steven, and the part that I love about this community is we've really developed a lot of deep partnerships where it used to be, hey, I don't necessarily have all the answers, right? I've been at Microsoft almost 20 years. Heather's been here for 5 years, came from the instruction background. It's amazing the partnerships that we've created in this community. And, I consistently thank the community members, right, who've shared their best practices. How have they had some of these conversations? So that's great. I really, and I like that success leaves clues, right? I am gonna steal that. I kind of wrote that down, Vince. So, that's a good one. You know who those leaders are, right, that are willing to engage in those conversations. And I'm telling you, if you're sitting in an IT organization, and I don't care whether it's in education or healthcare, and you're viewed as that place that is just not willing to change because this is the way that we've done things during these times, people are going to go around you. They're going to go through you, over you, and under you. And so really embracing that partnership mentality that you're speaking about, Vincent, I really think it's so valuable and enlightening.
Well,
So
you're doing it here, David. You and Heather are both doing it here. I mean, you've created this amazing community, and this is just continue to do it and get it out there.
So I'm going to give a little bit of pre-warning here, Vince. In the coming couple of weeks, so out of this discussion about in March, right, we started spending all this time around, we talk a lot about technology. We talk a lot about Microsoft acronyms all the time, all the time. And so I've been trying to not speak in acronyms anymore when I'm speaking to education leaders. And the really interesting thing is now we've taken on that and kind of put into a model. And I'll show people this a little bit later, some Skunkworks project that I and some other folks are working on, really how we model this around education outcomes based upon what you're using right inside of Office 365. And we never talk about the technology. We talk about, hey, what is your ability to grow given what you've already spent with Microsoft, for example, not in any one area. What's been your most successful partnership, Vince? If you had to think about all the things under this partnership umbrella, either real or discrete, what's been your most successful one and why?
Well, it's that's a really tough question, and I think having what I call 4 successful transformations, I probably could give you one for each of them. I will tell you, just recently, just having spent 19 months or so at Blackbaud, leading the technology partnership, having that strong partnership with Microsoft and the co-selling approach that we had to working with Microsoft to drive success, and being able to go in and meet with a provost or a CIO and having a conversation with and through the Microsoft sellers was invaluable to our success. And it ultimately led to us being U.S. Education Partner of the Year.
Oh, hey, I'm glad it was with us, Vince. So you spent a lot of time calling on advancement and institutional research and kind of that side, the endowment side of the house. Any prognostication, and again, this is strictly your opinion, not any other organization. What do you think is going to happen with some of these organizations that, we all come with different endowments, right? Some of us are public sector organizations, some of us are K through 12, kind of putting on that hat, right, of community fundraising. What do you think is going to happen with kind of the endowment scenarios, right? From I have a lot to I have not that much. How do you think that's going to look across education these days?
Well, I think I said it earlier, there's going to be winners and losers. And, I think what you're going to see, and I'm sure you know this better than I do, certainly in higher education, I think the community college, that environment's going to explode. I think people are going to realize, especially they can do a lot more online. They get their first 2 years under the belt. I think the largest schools, the ones that have the biggest endowments and have the biggest brand names, are going to be the most successful. And think about it, right? Because a lot of this can be done now digitally. The large organizations with the biggest brand names are going to be able to market themselves much more internationally, because students won't be coming to the United States internationally, right? So they have to backfill that. There's going to be a lot more distance learning for those organizations. I think the ones that are going to have the most trouble, the most squeeze, are going to be those middle schools, those smaller schools without the large endowments. And those are the ones that, unless their alum are giving regularly and more and heavily, they're going to struggle. They're going to be schools that are going to struggle and ultimately close. So that on the higher education side, K-12, certainly, the public schools are funded, but I do worry about tax dollars and if people aren't working and they're not paying their taxes, what's that going to do to affect budgets and the like.
Absolutely. No, that great insights. And I don't know if it was Jorge or somebody else had mentioned, we need to build up soft skills and influence and focus on other success. And so really, we embody that here at MS Office Hours, right? It's great that we can answer questions, Vince, but as you said, and I think it was Jason, right? Jason's part of the UT system. Trying to find those places where we can celebrate the successes. Not everyone hits it out of the park, right? We had Deb from SUNY Oneonta come on a couple of weeks. Yep, the UNT system. Sorry, not UT. Go UNT. There's an N there. I meant to say UNT, Jason. Having those soft skills, and we're all leaders, right, in our own capacity, whether it's thought leadership, discrete as managers, or as leaders within our organizations, having those soft skills, being able to discuss complex or difficult scenarios. I mean, it's an art, right? Just having that certification. Hey, I know Microsoft Teams, or I'm an MVP. Awesome, right? But like we took, we had Matt Wade on a couple of weeks ago, and this guy like lives and breathes some of our automation stuff, right, and workflow tools. And this guy is just he loves what he does, and he's just so open to the feedback, right? Where we're doing some pilots with a number of different schools, solving some problems that we may not have all the answers to. So it's fun, kind of skunk working some of these things, and some of them will fail, Vince. So I really appreciate your time today. Maybe we'll take one more question, and we're at the top of the hour. Let's see, Stephen Lane, you must have a question. How can I finally win the Cortican jug?
I don't have a question, but Vince, that was an excellent presentation. I'm looking forward to watching the recording when David posts it. So,
Thank you very much, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Alrighty, Vince, pleasure. We'll post this in the next day or two. And, I would encourage you folks in office hours community, share this with your team, share this with your leadership, because this is really, it's about mindset. It's being afraid not to fail and finding who are those partners, right? Both internally within your organization and then even outside, right? And so I'm doing some things that I'll talk about at another point in terms of how am I partnering with some of the organizations that I'm trying to support. And we're actually starting an alumni group at Microsoft for one of our schools that's kind of challenged with some of the funding models right now, and seeing how we can kind of lean in and help that school. So again, thank you so much, Vince. Really appreciate it. And you're welcome back anytime. Come and listen. And I think I'll send this out in the Teams channel. So I thank you, and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thanks
Heather.
for being here.
bye, Dave.
Take care.